I was running before I even realized my legs were moving. The voicemail from my daughter had been 3 words, barely audible between sobs. Dad, the bridge, please. That was 11 minutes ago. 11 minutes of my boots pounding the wet pavement along the riverfront in Savannah, Georgia. The Spanish moss hanging like ghosts from the live oaks above me, the night air thick enough to chew. I found her under the Talmadge Memorial Bridge, curled against a concrete pillar like a child hiding from a storm. My daughter Ellie, 31 years old, still wearing the pale blue dress she'd put on for dinner at her in-laws' house. The dress was torn at the shoulder. Her lip was split. One eye was already swelling shut. But what destroyed me wasn't the bruises. It was what she said when I knelt beside her and pulled her into my arms. She looked up at me with her one good eye and whispered, "Daddy, Mrs. Hargrove told me my people were built to serve theirs. She said I should be grateful they even let me sit at their table." I felt my whole body go still, not numb, the opposite. Every nerve in me lit up like a wire stripped of its insulation. My daughter's mother, my late wife Denise, was black. Born and raised in Beaufort, South Carolina, descended from Gullah Geechee, people who'd been on those sea islands since before the Civil War. Denise had been the most graceful, brilliant woman I'd ever known. She died of a brain aneurysm 6 years ago, and I'd carried that loss in my chest like a stone ever since. Ellie inherited her mother's deep brown skin, her wide smile, her quiet strength. She also inherited my stubbornness, which is probably why she married into the Hargrove family despite every warning sign I was too polite to name out loud. "Can you stand?" I asked, checking her over with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't. I wouldn't let them, not yet. "I think so," she said. "But Dad, there's something else." She pressed her palm flat against her stomach. "I'm 14 weeks. I found out last month. I was going to announce it tonight at dinner. That's why Margaret invited me over. She said she wanted to celebrate something. I thought she knew. I thought she was happy." Her voice broke apart like wet paper. "She wasn't happy, Dad. She had her son hold me down while she told me exactly what she thought of me carrying a Hargrove baby. Everything I'd built my life around, patience, fairness, the belief that people could be reasoned with, all of it cracked right down the center. I am 63 years old. I spent 38 of those years as a marine electrician at the Savannah shipyard, and another 20 running my own electrical contracting business. I've wired homes, churches, hospitals. I've spent my life connecting things, making systems work, bringing light into dark rooms. But in that moment, holding my beaten daughter under a bridge in the city I'd lived in my whole life, I understood darkness better than I ever had. "We're going to the hospital first," I told her, "and then we're going to burn their world to the ground." I drove Ellie to Memorial Health. She had a fractured cheekbone, 2 cracked ribs, deep bruising across her arms where someone had gripped her hard enough to leave fingerprints. But the baby was holding on. The doctor showed us the ultrasound, that tiny flickering heartbeat on the screen, stubborn and alive. Ellie cried when she saw it. I stepped into the hallway and cried too, just for a minute, with my forehead against the wall and my fist pressed to my mouth. Then I pulled myself together and started making calls. The Hargroves were old Savannah money, not plantation dynasty old, though Margaret Hargrove certainly acted like it. Her husband, Gerald Hargrove Sr., had built a commercial real estate empire in the 80s and 90s, buying up properties across Chatham County. When he died of a heart attack in 2019, Margaret took over. She ran the Hargrove Group with an iron fist and a smile that could cut glass. Their son, Gerald Jr., my son-in-law, was a soft man, handsome in that bland, country club way. Ellie had met him at a fundraiser for the Savannah College of Art and Design, where she worked as an admissions counselor. He'd seemed kind, seemed decent, seemed like the kind of man who'd chosen his own path away from his mother's shadow. He hadn't. I called the Savannah Chatham Metro Police from the hospital waiting room. Then I called my sister Patricia, who lived across the river in South Carolina. Pat had been a paralegal for 22 years before she retired, and she still had the mind of a woman who could find a needle in a haystack made of other needles. She answered on the second ring. "How bad?" she asked. I told her. The silence on her end lasted exactly 4 seconds. "I'm getting dressed," she said. "Don't touch anything at that house until I get there. And Raymond, don't do anything stupid before I arrive." I wasn't going to do anything stupid. I was going to do something very, very smart. While Ellie was sedated and resting, I drove to the house she shared with Gerald Jr. in Ardsley Park, a beautiful 1920s bungalow on a tree-lined street, the kind of house that whispered old money and good taste. I had a key because I'd rewired their entire electrical system last spring as a birthday gift to Ellie. Gerald was supposed to be at a conference in Atlanta, wouldn't be back until Friday. At least that's what he'd told Ellie. I let myself in and went straight to his study. His computer was locked, but Ellie had mentioned his password to me once, laughing about how he used the same one for everything. The name of his childhood dog followed by his birth year. I was in within seconds. What I found made me want to tear the desk apart with my bare hands. There was a shared cloud folder between Gerald and Margaret labeled family planning. Not the kind of family planning you'd expect. Inside were hundreds of messages going back 4 years to before the wedding. The earliest one from Margaret read, "Gerald, I have held my tongue long enough. This woman is not appropriate for our family. I don't care how educated she is or how well she speaks. She is black. The Hargroves have maintained their standing in this community for 3 generations. I will not watch you throw that away because you're infatuated with a girl from Beaufort." Gerald's reply, "Mom, I love her. People don't think like that anymore. It'll be fine." But it wasn't fine. Margaret never stopped. The messages continued week after week, month after month. She criticized Ellie's hair, her food, her family, her church. She wrote that Ellie's Gullah Geechee heritage was embarrassing, and that having her at charity events made the family look like they were performing diversity. She called my grandchild, the one not yet born, words I won't repeat, words that would have made Denise weep, and Gerald, my daughter's husband, the man who'd stood at the altar and promised to protect her, never once told his mother to stop. Instead, he started reporting back. He told Margaret every detail of Ellie's life. When she was ovulating, when she was taking pregnancy tests, when she expressed hope about starting a family. 6 months ago, Margaret's messages shifted. "We need to take action," she wrote. "If she gets pregnant, we'll never be rid of her. I've spoken with Dr. Redmond about options." Dr. Redmond. I recognized that name. He was the Hargroves' family physician, a man Gerald had insisted Ellie switch to after the wedding. I kept scrolling. Margaret had convinced Dr. Redmond to prescribe Ellie a medication for hormonal regulation that was actually a low-dose contraceptive. For 5 months, Ellie had been taking pills she thought were supplements, pills designed to prevent her from conceiving. The messages between Margaret and the doctor were clinical, cold, discussing my daughter's body like a piece of equipment that needed to be kept offline. But Ellie had gotten a second opinion 2 months ago from her old doctor in Beaufort, who'd told her to stop taking the pills immediately. She'd switched medications without telling Gerald, and she'd gotten pregnant. When Margaret found out, the messages turned violent. "This cannot happen," she wrote 3 weeks before the attack. "I would rather see him in prison than watch a mixed child carry the Hargrove name. I'm calling Curtis Wade." I'd met him once at a Hargrove family barbecue, a big man, ex-military, who worked as Margaret's property manager. The kind of man who did whatever Margaret asked, without questions. The message from the night of the attack, sent at 5:47 p.m., read, "Curtis will handle the physical side. You make sure she's at the house by 7. Tell her it's a celebration. After tonight, file for divorce. Cite irreconcilable differences. I'll have Douglas draw up the papers by morning." Douglas Keller was the Hargrove family attorney. Gerald's response, sent at 5:52 p.m. "Understood. She just left to get ready. She thinks we're announcing the pregnancy. I feel sick about this. But you're right. It has to be done." He felt sick. My son-in-law felt sick while he set up his pregnant wife to be beaten. He felt sick while he let his mother orchestrate an assault on the woman carrying his child. I felt something beyond sick. I felt the kind of calm that comes when you've passed through anger and arrived at a place where every thought is perfectly clear. I photographed every message, downloaded the entire cloud folder onto 2 separate flash drives, found the financial records showing Margaret's payments to Curtis Wade, $8,000 a month for property management consulting, plus a $30,000 bonus 3 weeks ago labeled Special Project. I found Gerald's browser history showing he'd researched divorce attorneys in the days before the attack. I found a draft of a restraining order against Ellie that Douglas Keller had prepared, claiming she was emotionally unstable and a danger to herself, ready to file the morning after the assault, designed to keep her away from the house and destroy her credibility if she went to the police. I heard the front door open. My hand froze on the mouse. But it was Patricia, letting herself in with the spare key I'd told her was under the third flower pot. She walked into the study, looked at the screen, and went pale. "Tell me that says what I think it says," she whispered. "It's worse," I said. We spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Pat organized it with the precision of someone who'd spent decades preparing evidence for trial. She created a timeline, cross-referenced the financial records with the messages, identified every person involved. When we were done, she looked at me across the desk and said, "The police will arrest them. But that's not enough, is it?" "No," I said. "It's not." "Good," she said, and for the first time that night, she almost smiled. "Because I've been waiting 20. We went to the police first. Detective Marcus Holloway at the Savannah-Chatham Metro PD took our report and the evidence. He was a tall man with careful eyes who listened without interrupting, then said, "Mr. Dawson, in 22 years of police work, this is one of the most disturbing things I've reviewed. We'll have warrants by morning." But Patricia and I weren't waiting for morning. We made our own calls. I'd been in Savannah my whole life. I'd wired half the houses in the historic district. I'd done electrical work for restaurants, law firms, media offices. I knew people. More importantly, people knew me, knew my character, knew my family, knew what Denise had meant to this community before she passed. I called James Whitfield, an investigative reporter at the Savannah Morning News, who'd done a story on my business 5 years ago. I told him everything. I sent him the evidence. "Raymond," he said quietly, "this is going to be the biggest story this city has seen in a decade." "I know," I said. "Run it." Patricia, meanwhile, called Vanessa Rhodes, a civil rights attorney in Atlanta who'd made a career out of cases exactly like this. Vanessa answered her phone at 2 in the morning, listened for 10 minutes, and said, "I'll be in Savannah by noon. Don't let anyone touch those files." Then Pat called someone I didn't expect, a producer at a national news network. Turned out Pat had helped prepare documents for a civil rights case 15 years ago that this producer had covered. They'd stayed in touch. "If the local story gets traction," Pat told me, "and it will, this woman will take it national within 48 hours. The warrants came through at 8 a.m. Curtis Wade was arrested at his apartment on the south side, still sleeping. He had Ellie's blood on his boots. He'd been too arrogant or too stupid to wash them. He broke down in interrogation within an hour, gave up everything. How Margaret had called him, how she'd told him to teach the girl a lesson and make sure she loses that baby, how Gerald had let him into the house and then left so he wouldn't have to watch. Curtis confirmed that Gerald had driven to a bar on River Street and sat there drinking while his wife was being beaten in his own living room. Margaret Hargrove was arrested at the Hargrove Group offices on Bay Street at 9:15 a.m. According to the officers who brought her in, she'd been on a conference call when they walked in. She'd looked at the handcuffs and said, "Do you have any idea who I am?" They did. That's why they'd brought the news cameras. James Whitfield's story hit the Savannah Morning News website at 10 a.m. By noon, it had more views than any article in the paper's history. The headline was devastating. The story laid out everything: the messages, the payments, the fake medication, the assault, the planned cover-up. James had done his homework. He'd found 2 former employees of the Hargrove Group who'd been fired after complaining about Margaret's racial comments. He'd found a former girlfriend of Gerald's, a Latina woman from Jacksonville, who said Margaret had threatened her with legal action if she didn't end the relationship. He'd found records showing the Hargrove Group had systematically avoided hiring black contractors for over a decade, despite operating in a city that was more than half black. Gerald Jr. was arrested at the Westin in Atlanta at 2 p.m. He wasn't at a conference. He'd been hiding in a hotel room, watching the news coverage on his phone, trying to figure out how to run. His law school classmate, who he'd called begging for help, had called the police instead. By the time the national network picked up the story that evening, Savannah was already in an uproar. The Hargrove name was on buildings all over the city. Their company managed shopping centers, office parks, rental properties. Tenants started organizing. Business partners started distancing themselves. The mayor issued a statement. The story Patricia's contact had promised to break nationally ran 3 days later, during prime time. 12 minutes of documented evidence, interviews with Ellie's doctors, statements from former Hargrove employees, and a tearful interview with Ellie herself, sitting in her hospital bed with her bruised face and her hand on her belly, saying, "I just wanted to be part of their family. I just wanted my baby to have a family." That segment was watched by 11 million people. Social media did the rest. Within a week, every major news outlet in the country had covered it. The Hargrove name, the name Margaret had tried to protect above all else, became a symbol of everything ugly and rotten about racism, hiding behind wealth and respectability. The legal reckoning came in waves. Curtis Wade pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, assault on a pregnant woman, and conspiracy. He received 18 years. At sentencing, he turned to Ellie and said he was sorry, that Margaret had made him believe he was protecting the family. Ellie didn't look at him. Margaret Hargrove's trial lasted 2 weeks. Her defense attorney argued she was a grieving widow under enormous stress, that she'd never intended physical harm, that Curtis had gone beyond her instructions. The jury didn't buy a word of it. They heard the messages. They saw the financial records. They watched Margaret sit in the witness stand and refer to my grandchild as the situation. They convicted her of conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, conspiracy to commit assault on a pregnant woman, and criminal solicitation. The judge, a 71-year-old man named Honorable William Odom, who'd sat on the Chatham County bench for 30 years, sentenced her to 22 years. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, "you had every privilege this society can offer. Wealth, education, influence. You used all of it to try to destroy an innocent woman and her unborn child because you could not tolerate the color of her skin. This court has no sympathy for you." Margaret appealed. The appeal was denied. She entered the Georgia state prison system at 68 years old. I heard she refused to eat for the first week, then she ate. Survival instinct is stronger than pride, even in people like her. Gerald Jr. tried to cooperate, gave statements against his mother, claimed he was manipulated, said he'd been afraid of Margaret his whole life. Some of that might have been true, but the messages were the messages. His own words convicted him. Understood. She just left to get ready. He was found guilty of conspiracy to commit assault and criminal negligence. He received 11 years. The Georgia State Bar revoked his license before the verdict was even read. Dr. Redmond lost his medical license after a state board investigation revealed he'd prescribed contraceptives to Ellie without her knowledge or consent. He faced criminal charges for practicing medicine in a deceptive manner and settled a separate malpractice suit for an amount that was never made public. Douglas Keller, the family attorney who drafted the fraudulent restraining order, was disbarred. Vanessa Rhodes filed the civil suit while the criminal cases were still pending. She named Margaret, Gerald, Curtis, Dr. Redmond, Douglas Keller, and the Hargrove Group as defendants. The discovery process revealed that the Hargrove Group was worth approximately $45 million, that Margaret had been siphoning company funds for personal vendettas for years, and that the company had a documented pattern of racial discrimination in hiring and tenant selection. The civil jury awarded Ellie $28 million in compensatory and punitive damages. The Hargrove Group was forced into receivership. Their properties were sold off piece by piece. The buildings that still bore the Hargrove name had the letters scraped off within a month. Nobody wanted that name on their building anymore. But here's what I think about when I can't sleep at night. The part that matters more than the money or the verdicts or the headlines. 4 months after the attack, on a cold February morning at Memorial Health in Savannah, my daughter gave birth to a baby girl. She named her Denise Amara. Denise for her mother, Amara, a name from the Gullah Geechee tradition, meaning grace. I was in the room when she was born. I held Ellie's hand while she pushed, and I caught myself talking to my wife in my head, the way I sometimes do. "You should see her, Denise. She's so strong, just like you." When the nurse placed that baby in Ellie's arms, I saw my daughter's face transform. Every bruise was gone by then, the bones healed, the scars fading. But the real healing happened in that moment, when she looked at her daughter and understood that everything she'd survived had brought her here. Little Denise came out with a head full of dark curls and her grandmother's cheekbones, and the loudest cry I'd ever heard from something that small. The nurse laughed and said, "That one's got opinions already." She does. She still does. Ellie filed for divorce from Gerald while he was awaiting trial. He didn't contest it. His attorney sent a letter asking if Ellie would allow Gerald to be part of the baby's life when he was released. Ellie's response was one sentence: He can explain to her himself why he sat in a bar while someone beat her mother. She moved back to Beaufort, to the town where Denise grew up, where the Gullah Geechee culture is still alive in the sweetgrass baskets and the ring shouts and the stories the old folks tell on their porches in the evening. I sold my house in Savannah and moved down there too. Built us a house on a piece of land that looks out over the marsh, the same marsh Denise used to paint in watercolors that still hang in my bedroom. Pat lives 10 minutes away. She comes over for dinner most nights, and on Sundays, the whole community seems to end up on our porch somehow. Neighbors, old friends, Ellie's colleagues from the domestic violence nonprofit she founded last year. 2 years later, Denise Amara is a force of nature. She's walking, running, climbing everything she can find, talking in full sentences that don't always make sense but are always delivered with absolute conviction. Her favorite word is more. More food, more stories, more swinging, more grandpa. She calls me Pop Pop, the same thing Ellie called my father. She doesn't know about the Hargroves yet. Someday she will. Someday, Ellie will sit her down and tell her the story of how she came into this world, how there were people who tried to prevent her from existing because they couldn't stand the thought of what she represented. And Ellie will tell her that those people lost, that they lost everything, their freedom, their fortune, their legacy, their name, and that what they tried to destroy not only survived but grew into something beautiful and loud and full of opinions. I'm sitting on my porch right now, watching the sun go down over the marsh. Ellie's inside, giving Denise a bath. I can hear the splashing and the giggling through the open window. The Spanish moss is catching the last of the light, turning gold the way it does this time of year. And I'm thinking about Margaret Hargrove sitting in a prison cell right now, and I'm thinking about how badly she miscalculated. She thought bloodlines were everything. She thought purity was power. She thought she could erase my daughter and my granddaughter from existence because they didn't fit her vision of what a family should look like. She was wrong about all of it. Gerald Jr. will get out of prison eventually. He'll be middle-aged, disbarred, broke, and alone. No family, no legacy, no children who want to know him. The Hargrove name will mean nothing except a cautionary tale they teach in law school ethics courses. But the name Denise Amara Dawson, Ellie took back my last name. That name carries the weight of the Gullah Geechee people, of Denise's paintings, of my father's hands that taught me how to build, of Patricia's sharp mind, of Ellie's unbreakable spine. That name will go on. Denise Amara will grow up speaking Gullah phrases her grandmother would have taught her. She'll eat shrimp and grits on Sunday mornings and know that her great-great-grandparents survived things far worse than the Hargroves. She'll know that when hatred tried to stop her heart before it even started beating, her family stood up and said, "No, not here, not ever." That's what I want anyone listening to take from this. Don't be polite about racism. Don't wait for it to get better on its own. Don't convince yourself that love alone will fix people who've decided your blood makes you less than human. It won't. Carolyn Hargrove's hatred simmered for 4 years before it turned into violence. Gerald enabled it every single day by saying nothing, and his silence nearly killed my daughter and my grandchild. If someone in your life is poisoning the well, whether it's a mother-in-law, a spouse, a colleague, anyone, don't wait for the poison to reach your glass. Act, speak, fight, protect the people who depend on you, and if you've ever been told you don't belong, that your heritage is a problem, that your existence is an inconvenience to someone else's idea of purity, hear me when I say this. You are not the inconvenience. They are. Your blood, whatever it's made of, wherever it comes from, is exactly right. The people who can't see that are the ones with something broken in them, not you. Denise Amara doesn't know any of this yet. Right now, her biggest concern is whether I'll read her 3 books at bedtime instead of 2. The answer is always 3, sometimes 4, because that's what grandfathers do. We build things. We read stories. We sit on porches and watch the light change over the water, and we think about the women who made us who we are, the wives we lost, and the daughters who survived, and the granddaughters who carry it all forward. Margaret Hargrove wanted to preserve a name. I wanted to preserve a family. She's in a cell. I'm on a porch. My granddaughter is laughing in the bathtub. I think we both know who won. That's my story. That's not revenge, really. Revenge would mean I wanted to hurt them. I didn't. I wanted to stop them. I wanted to protect what matters. And then I wanted to build something so strong and so full of love that no amount of hatred could ever touch it again. I think I did. I think Denise would be proud.